All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. This is season 2, baby.
Baby, you thought you got rid of us, but you can't, because we don't have any money put into this. So
I mean, they're the ones who are actively, coming back to listen.
yeah, the 6 of you that are out there, we respect you. We
Hey.
see you.
We got more than 6. We're doing okay.
The 16 that are out there, we see
double
you.
that, buddy,
No way.
and then some. Yeah, we're doing pretty good. Yeah.
Whoa.
Okay. Anyways, thank you all for tuning in once again. We're super excited for season 2. Twice as big, twice as fun, twice as historical. So if you're new, my name's Dustin. I have no credentials. I'm just a guy who kind of co-hosts a podcast and watches movies from time to time. And then this is my friend Kyle.
He's
He's not going to tell you about his credentials.
Kyle is a MA in history, a lover of gummy bears, and a man whose pancreas does not work well enough to eat gummy bears. Those are the 3 most important things you need to know about Kyle.
Is that your Tinder profile?
I don't have a Tinder profile, man.
All right, man. So what are we talking about today?
We are talking about the excellent Christopher Nolan film Oppenheimer that came out in November of 2023.
No.
Earlier.
No, it was
it was
earlier
a
than
summer
that.
release. Yeah. No, that's Napoleon was November. Ugh.
Yeah.
Dates. Time's not real. It's a 2023 movie, so it's very new in the scheme of things, especially in the scheme of movies that we discuss on this podcast.
So while we're recording this is like a week before the Oscars, and then when it comes out, it'll be probably about a week after the Oscars. So
if Oppenheimer doesn't win one, I'm a riot.
Oppenheimer is nominated for 13 Oscars. So I would imagine they're going to win at least a couple.
I'd hope so, man.
This is Christopher Nolan's 12th film. He's writer, director. This is his sits with Cillian Murphy. Interesting little behind the scenes. What started his fascination with this was actually brought up in his previous movie Tenet. And Oppenheimer is kind of mentioned in a scene in that film. He's had this idea for a while about a complex character, someone who is good to some people and bad to others. He's a polarizing figure for sure, which Oppenheimer fits the bill for. Let's talk about this cast, buddy. Before we get started, let's talk about this cast. Okay, we got Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr., Scott Grimes, Jason Clarke. Who else? I know we got some more here. Kenneth, I'm gonna say his last name wrong. Branagh.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got some names. I feel like I'm missing some people, but you get the idea.
It stars. Oh, Florence Pugh.
Oh yeah, Florence Pugh. Yeah. Yeah, we've got some names here for sure.
Sorry, Flo, if we didn't mean to leave you out.
Gosh dang it! And the cameo, not even a cameo, for Truman, Gary Oldman.
Gary Oldman. Dude, you cannot recognize him in that role.
You have Gary Oldman
as a fringe character. He has
Gordon.
like 8 words. Dude,
Yeah.
Batman began in Oppenheimer, apparently.
Man, yeah, you had a lot of repeats from the Batman trilogy. If only we could have got Christian Bale in here somehow.
Dude, if only Tom Hardy could have found a way to be like, you merely adopted the Doc.
It's funny you should say that.
Into it.
I'm gonna bring that up later. Tom Hardy, who I think Tom Hardy should have played.
Everyone and no one?
No.
Oh.
No, one specific role. And we'll
Hitler,
get to it.
right?
We'll get to it. Okay. All right. So we start off. Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to man.
Ooh.
And for this, he was chained to a rock and tortured for eternity.
Ooh.
So you will quickly realize watching this film that part of it is in black and white and part of it is in color. And according to Christopher Nolan, the color portions are of Oppenheimer's point of view. It is his account of what happened, while the black and white portions are objective. They are from everyone else's point of view. So we open with Oppenheimer sitting in front of a board giving his testimony, and Strauss walking into court to give testimony as well. This is going to be our two main plot lines. We're going to try our best to cover the Manhattan Project in this one, and the hearing with Strauss in a later episode.
Yes.
Okay. So one of the first times we see Oppenheimer in a classroom, is it Niels Bohr?
Yeah.
Bohr.
Mm-hmm.
He's his professor, I guess.
He's a German physicist.
Right.
What he is. Yeah.
And this is pre-Nazi rise to power.
Yeah. This is what is it? Late 20s, early 30s. I think.
Yeah. So, we're predating the arms race. But he will end up being the German Oppenheimer. He's going to be the one who leads Germany's program for building up an atomic bomb. And early on, he's Oppenheimer's professor, and Oppenheimer puts potassium cyanide in his apple.
So easy bit of confusion here that I also made a mistake, but just to start the ball rolling correctly, Niels Bohr is actually Danish. I misspoke. And he's not the one who is the counter Oppenheimer. He's the one that they keep trying to bring into the program. They can't get out of Denmark because the Nazis have him on lock and guard. It's what is this? I had it. Give me a second. It's a Heisenberg. Heisenberg is Germany's Oppenheimer.
Okay.
And Heisenberg is the one that he meets like in passing in that giant hallway scene with Ravi.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's restart that again.
Yeah.
Okay. So Kyle, all right, so we meet him early on. He's in Germany.
He's in Germany in 1926.
Okay.
No, he's at Cambridge. He's in Cambridge in 1926 is when we meet Oppenheimer.
Okay.
Oppenheimer is going to see Niels Bohr, who is visiting Cambridge to give a speech on theoretical physics. Oppenheimer is so homesick that he's freaking crazy, and he tries to poison his professor with cyanide, and then last minute manages to stop it.
Okay.
Then meeting Isidore Rabi on a train through Europe to go to Germany to meet Heisenberg and see Niels Bohr speak again is how Oppenheimer gets to Germany in the late 20s, early 30s.
Okay. And Heisenberg is the one who leads the German atomic bomb project.
Heisenberg's the Nazi. Like, Heisenberg is the, like, yes, we will develop a bomb. Niels Bohr is the guy that probably could have gotten it done, but he refused to work with the Nazis.
Okay.
Like, he just would not do it.
Okay. So he leaves Cambridge because he says he doesn't like the lab.
Mm-hmm.
There are visuals of an explosion as he appears to be tortured by his own pursuit of knowledge and of answers. And I was watching a documentary around this time, and apparently this is kind of whenever he switched from, I don't remember exactly what he was studying, but this is kind of whenever he became fascinated with theoretical physics. And he kind of adopted almost a character of Oppie. He's not confident. He's not social. He's not seen as anybody particularly distinguished in his field, but he creates a character who's memorable and becomes those things as a result. So this is kind of when Oppie becomes reality. And so Strauss, who we'll get to a little more later on, wants Oppenheimer to run the institute at, I believe, Berkeley.
I think that's correct, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And Einstein is visiting this campus.
Mm-hmm.
Einstein had published his theory of relativity 40 years prior. But Einstein's theory of relativity really leads to it kind of lays the groundwork for the Manhattan Project and the physics, the theoretical physics that make the atom bomb possible. I watched a documentary on Netflix called Einstein and the Bomb. You didn't know you were going to get an extra here, but here it is. It's garbage. It's so bad. It's crap. It makes Einstein look like a buffoon who is
Oh,
belittled
no.
by this random Japanese dude who just
Oh,
shows
no.
up and guilt trips him at the end of the film. It's horrible. But there was some information here. Einstein said, "Had I known the Germans would not succeed in creating an atomic bomb, I would not have participated in opening that Pandora's box." That's a quote from him. So he fled Germany in, I want to say, 1933. He lived in exile in Britain. Nazis placed a $20,000 or 20,000 mark bounty on his head. And then essentially they published a bunch of propaganda saying that he was wrong. And kind of made it to where, like, if you agreed with him, you were against their science, which they called, like, just like the true science. Anyways, but he was excluded from the Manhattan Project due to security risks, which is a big part of the film. Okay, so an important scene here: Oppenheimer and Einstein speak at the edge of a pond. Strauss walks by Einstein as he leaves, and Albert just completely ignores him.
Yeah.
Doesn't pay any attention to him. So he asked Oppenheimer, "What'd you say to him?" He goes, "Oh, nothing. Doesn't matter." But this is an important part. This and a little bit later on, which shows why Strauss was so vicious towards Oppenheimer.
It's also like this scene is after World War II and after
Mhm.
the events of a good 2/3 of the film, and so you're kind of off kilter when you watch it, which actually like works well. Like you're kind of like, what is going on? Like what? Like why is Einstein so upset at every human in this scene? Like,
Yeah.
because he just looks like a nice old man who feeds ducks and like flies kites on the
Right.
Berkeley campus.
Who wouldn't want to be Einstein at this point? Okay, we're going to take a trip back. Now we're going back in time. We're getting to where we're going to start building the atom bomb. We're building up to the Manhattan Project. And we get into a few different things going on here. And we're kind of introduced to Oppenheimer's life.
Quick edit. It's actually Princeton is where
it's Princeton. It's not Berkeley.
It's Princeton. No,
Gosh, dang it.
Berkeley's where he's at when in where we're about to talk about in the movie. It's Princeton is where he's offered a position because Princeton is the premier school.
Is there a difference? They're basically all the same.
Well, one's in California and one's in New Jersey.
Okay, so there's a little bit of space between them.
One had Einstein that puttered around and one did not. Like,
all right. So we have Princeton. He was at Princeton.
He's at Princeton.
Now
we're gonna backtrack. He is at Berkeley. Like he is
at Berkeley.
A physics professor at Berkeley.
See, you bounce around with the time and it gets confusing.
In our defense, if you've seen Oppenheimer, it's a very time-bouncy movie, and it works excellently, but it makes it very difficult to split into two different podcast episodes, but we're also not going to sit here and babble for 3 hours in the same episode.
Hopefully not.
Sorry, guys.
So, another little side note, I did not realize how much happened how fast until I tried to take notes while watching this movie. It's a 3-hour movie.
It's beautifully paced.
The first 2 hours, I kept having to pause it and write down because I couldn't write it fast enough. So dense, so many things that are happening, and we're gonna break this apart a little bit. So a couple of things are gonna happen. He's teaching at Berkeley.
At Berkeley.
Okay. Yes. He has, who is this guy next door to him who does the experiments, and he's the one who says theory will only get you so far.
Ernest Lawrence. It's Lawrence. Professor Lawrence.
Professor Lawrence.
Is the guy.
Okay, so the guy who's next door to him is
by Josh
Professor
Hartnett.
Lawrence, and he's played by Josh Hartnett, which is from The Faculty, and I'm pretty sure Halloween H2O.
And Pearl Harbor. And Black Hawk Down.
Yeah. So he was a big name a while ago. I haven't seen him in anything in a long time. But I was watching this and I was like, I know that guy. What is he from? Yeah, Halloween H2O. Anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he is next to Professor Lawrence, and this is going to be one of the first kind of links that lead to the team that makes the Manhattan Project or turns into the Manhattan Project. Okay, so he's going to start giving his lectures on theoretical physics.
Hmm.
At the same time, there is a move for the Communist Party in America, which is something that I wasn't really aware of, was popular pre-World War II. I knew with the McCarthy era, post-World War II, it was a big deal. But
Hmm.
um, what is going on pre-rise of Nazi Germany? Why are people supporting the Communist Party?
Yeah, so it's kind of complicated because, like, there's no just one answer to that. Um, Prior to World War II and the Cold War, America had a pretty sizable socialist movement.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like way back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, they had one. It's never as big as Europe, which is why we don't have a socialist party in our cabinet or our Congress, like pretty much all of Europe does. But we had one, and in after the chaos that is World War One, and after the gratuitous, irresponsible capitalism that leads to the Great Depression, there is this really big counterculture movement economically about
Okay.
how communism, done correctly, is the path forward. Partly because of the, at the time, radically leftist, quote unquote, policies of the New Deal, which helped pull America out of the
Okay.
Depression. But you have this firsthand observation that spending money in federal aid programs makes the government money, or at least stimulates the economy. And that kind of grows and combines with the socialist faction into this communist movement. It's not huge, but it's very, very one dimensional demographically. It's a lot of professors. It's more West Coast than it is East Coast. It's a lot of intellectuals, and it's a lot of people that already come from money, and so they kind of benefit from the idealism that like coming from money gives
Right.
you. They're not communists as we think of communists because modern Americans conflate communism with totalitarianism, which isn't inherently true. Communism is just an economic policy and a social idea. So American communists think that the economy should be controlled or regulated heavily by the government to prevent another Great Depression. They believe that everybody should be equal. Um, they don't love personal property, things like that, but they're not like Stalinists. Like they're not like we like dictatorships. So
Okay, so Oppenheimer, just kind of breezing through this, he's never gonna fully join the Communist Party.
no.
His brother is planning on joining it, and he's very close with him. And then there is a girl named Jean Tatlock who he
Mhm.
meets at one of these kind of communist get-together um, parties, and has an affair with her. And she's, obviously pro-communist as
Well,
well.
she's
But
communist. Like
yes,
she's like part of the party.
so she's part of the party. His brother's part of the party. His going to be wife was formerly part of the party,
Mhm.
but he never formally joins. And you
Nope.
can see that he is, this is where we really start to see his inner contradictions, his conflict within. Because, he very much toes the line between not really knowing which side is correct. And I think that makes him a very great character to dissect and makes him relatable in that sense. Um, and I think that's a good reason why a lot of this movie is focused around him and from his perspective. So there is one line in here that I was just curious on. So during the communist part, or during one of their communist rallies, they're talking about sending money to Spain.
Mhm.
What's going on in Spain? Why are they sending money over there?
Yeah, so in 1936, I believe, somewhere in there, Spain gets embroiled in civil war.
Mm,
So at the same time that fascists are taking over, being elected into positions of power in Germany and Italy and Japan, Spain also has a fascist movement, but it takes the form of an armed uprising against the Republican government of Spain that has been in place for a hot minute. Um, and so this general named Francisco Franco uh, leads a massive armed coup against the legitimate Spanish government. And because he's a fascist, and because he conforms to the ideals that Mussolini and Hitler are pushing in the other parts of Europe, Germany and Italy, but Germany specifically, send giant amounts of military aid to Franco and his army. The resistance to this is the remnants of the Spanish Republican Army, as well as volunteers from other countries and a large contingent of communist volunteers, specifically because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So communists and fascists are natural enemies for a lot of reasons, and the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany hate the shit out of each other even before World War II because they are a fundamental threat to each other's existence, like economically. They are complete opposites of the spectrum. And so Stalin is the only leader to send aid, considerable aid at least, to the Spanish resistance against the fascist army. So that in and of itself brings a lot of communists to the front. And so the American Communist Party, like all the communist parties around the world, are trying to raise money to protect the legitimate government of Spain, but because they're communists, they don't get a lot of traction going in other countries. And also because other countries, after the debacle that is World War I, are really not willing to step into what is perceived as an internal civil war in Spain.
So which side ends up winning?
The fascists.
Okay.
In fact, Spain is the last fascist government to fall, them or Portugal. But they have a fascist regime under Franco until he dies in the 70s. And then King Carlos II, I think, has to very, very gradually work it back off of fascism. Like we could do a whole podcast on like the fallout of the Spanish Revolution.
We'll have to find a movie on it, man.
Or the Spanish Civil War. There probably is one, but it's probably not in English.
Yeah, but that's all right. We can read subtitles.
Yeah, I mean, we watched Wings. We have stamina. But all right, man. it's kind of it's like a proxy World War II. Like it shows the terrifying military might that Germany has amassed. Right. So yeah.
Okay. So moving on, the boys are going to go camping. This is him and his brother and another guy. I forget who the third one is. So the boys go camping and Oppenheimer discusses a black hole. And it's just theory. It's not proven at this point. And then on campus, shortly after, they learned of nuclear fission and the splitting of the atom, which was done by German scientists. Hitler invades Poland.
Yep.
And the world changes in an instant. What is the FAECT?
Yeah, it is the Federation of Architects, Engineers, Chemists, and Technicians. It was a labor union in the United States from 1930 to 33 to right after World War II. And so all it is it's like any other labor union. It's just very specific to those those four occupations. Okay. And so it's directed towards college campuses, engineering firms, things like that. It's a white collar union. It's an academic union because most unions at the time are auto workers or sanitation workers. So it's kind of a, just because we work cushy jobs, we deserve rights in the workplace too, is kind of their thought.
Okay. So this is where we're going to insert Colonel Groves. This is played by Matt Damon. And I mentioned earlier that if there was one role I would have switched, I think, and I love Matt Damon as an actor, I don't think he plays Groves. After watching the Oppenheimer documentary, Groves in real life is 6'3", 240 pounds. Is a very, looks like a high school football coach. Is a very no-nonsense type of guy. And I feel like Matt Damon just had, or not that he did a bad job, but it's funny you mentioned Tom Hardy earlier, and I was thinking like, man, Tom Hardy could have played that. I feel like Tom Hardy could have been Groves, and it would have been, I don't know if it'd be better, but it would have been maybe a more true to the real life person, character.
I think it's possible that part of the reason that Matt Damon's personality is so much more abrasive than like you kind of get when you watch documentaries about Groves is because he is a person, doesn't have the physical intimidation factor, and so as a good actor, he was like, well, since I can't make myself be 6'3", I'm going to make my personality 6'3", So yeah, I think he gets the role of Groves across, but I think he like changed the intimidating part of Graves.
Right. It's just a different way of portraying him, and it kind of changes the character. Like I said, not a bad thing.
No, it works really well in the movie.
Yeah.
Like it's not abrasive in the movie. It's just if you study Groves, you're like, okay, so he wasn't quite a loudmouth asshole so much as he was just very much, you're going to do what I tell you because I'm a colonel in the U.S. Army.
Right. But yeah, so it's different, and he does have very human moments later on with Oppie, and I think it comes across differently. Okay, so quick fact check. Hitler called quantum physics the Jewish science to Einstein's face.
I couldn't find proof that he said that to Einstein's face. Doesn't mean he didn't. Just means that I didn't have time to search the depths of the internet. Hitler was definitely anti-Semitic, obviously.
Right.
Wouldn't put it past him to have said something along those lines. Or probably if he said that, it's when Einstein refused to join the Nazi government and work as a government scientist. Be my guess. Hitler really liked to insult people who pissed him off. Like it's just...
Right. And like I said earlier with the Einstein documentary, even though I didn't really enjoy it, it was still there was obviously propaganda against Einstein. So I don't know if he really said it to his face. I was just curious if they ever actually like met in person.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. Einstein was like really, really important. More so than we give him credit for today. And he also he makes Germany relevant at a time when Germany is no longer relevant, post World War I and before the rise of Hitler. And Hitler is stupid, but he's not dumb. He knows that like scientists are important, and he is willing, especially in the earlier days of the Nazi government, to, I don't want to say ignore, to warp his usage of anti-Semitism to get smart people where he thinks he needs them. So he's willing to ignore the fact that Einstein is Jewish for a little bit until Einstein tells him no. And then the more powerful Hitler gets and the more drugged out he is and the crazier he becomes, the more he becomes even more anti-Semitic than he already was. Okay. So the idea that scientists were excluded from the German nuclear program simply because they were Jewish it definitely happened. I don't know to what extent. I don't know if that just meant that they were late to the party or they didn't get the funding they needed, but that's a very real thing. That if indeed the leading like theoretical physicists, especially in Europe, were all Jewish, then Germany would have been very hesitant to use them.
Right. Okay, so they're going to build a town in New Mexico. This is based off of Robert Oppenheimer's request. He needs space. He needs a way to keep it from the public. And he can move everything he needs to a town. They literally go out in the middle of the desert and they build a town. Fun fact, they shot in the real Los Alamos for at least for portions of it, and then they had to build the rest of it around it. And also they were shooting in Oppenheimer's real house. So he is recruiting scientists, and he tells them, I forget exactly who, but he says, I have skeletons in my closet, and they put me in charge. They need us. And the scientist replies, until they don't. And this is really going to be a foreshadowing of what's going to happen post Trinity test. Ravi, who we met earlier on, says he's not going to be part of the project. You drop a bomb and it falls on the just and the unjust. And he also mentions 3 centuries of physics to make a weapon of mass destruction.
Isaac Newton, baby. That's where it all started.
So there's a K6 pin on Oppenheimer on his jacket. Do we know what this is for?
We did until we, and by we I mean Kyle, forgot. So give me a second. It's identification numbers. So it's just his Los Alamos security number. Like they look at it and they're like, okay, that's Oppenheimer. Like
that's fair.
But it's cool that they went out of the way to research what his actual badge number was for the movie. Like that's awesome. That's why we hire historians, guys. Just throwing that out.
Just throwing it out there. So, we're gonna kind of get into this little classroom, brainstorming room, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. You're gonna get all of the scientists into one space together, and they're gonna start talking about, okay, how are we gonna build this thing? There's a couple different aspects to it. I'm not gonna act like I understood 90% of it.
Nope.
So, the main thing is they did a bunch of uranium, which I was watching a interesting. Okay, there's uranium and there's plutonium. Uranium was, if I believe I have this right, uranium was the better source to use because it was more reactive. I want to say, and it was easier to get, but it's so reactive that if they were going to use like a bullet, if you think of it like they're firing part of it into a cylinder, which they talked about earlier on, it would actually be like it would dissolve and be eaten up before it would reach where it needed to detonate. So it wouldn't detonate. So there's 1,000 problems that went wrong and 1,000 things that had to be answered in order for them to do it.
That's fascinating. I had no idea. I didn't understand why, other than like radioactive resources are rare. Like I didn't know why they would use two different ones. So that's cool.
If you're interested in if you liked Oppenheimer, the movie, and you have Peacock, watch the I forget the name of it, but the Oppenheimer documentary on it about his life, and it really follows the movie quite a bit. It's meant to accompany it, but it is very much gives a lot of information on a lot of things.
Nice.
Anyways, so
another important point is that they have sectioned out the Manhattan Project. So the Manhattan Project is also in Tennessee, Pennsylvania, or Chicago, somewhere in there, and a couple other places. Because it's security, and it's if something goes catastrophically wrong in one lab, it won't hurt the other ones, and it's also they all report to the central apparatus, but they don't visit each other. They don't communicate the process to each other. They are only supposed to send the finished product of whatever they do back to Los Alamos, which is kind of the central hub.
Right. So there's a guy in this room that I was talking about with all the different scientists together. Teller. So he instantly, upon meeting him, he goes, my calculations show that this is exponential, which means you try to set off this bomb and it will ignite the atmosphere and it will destroy the world.
And at first glance, even as a viewer, from what you have been told about what they're trying to accomplish, that sounds feasible. Because the whole thing is that splitting an atom, from what you learn just watching the movie, splitting one atom does absolutely nothing, except potentially create the energy to split more atoms. And so the way an atomic bomb is made is that you channel the energy to keep splitting more atoms. And so if that's what you're doing, and that's the perception you as the watcher have while watching the movie, this guy being like, has anybody thought about the fact that it just won't stop? That like if we provide enough energy, they'll just keep going. You're like, oh, it might. And the craziest thing is, it won't, because we live in the post-atomic age, and you're still like, oh damn, did they blow up the atmosphere? Is that what happens in this movie?
Is that why it's so freaking hot out?
Like, the whole movie, better, but you're like, oh my god. Oh, yeah, good point.
And it turns into more of a metaphorical chain reaction later on. Again, foreshadowing. This is so perfectly
such a good
written.
Movie. Such a beautiful movie.
So anyways, Oppenheimer takes his calculations to Einstein. And he's like, look, we haven't always seen eye to eye, but Can you run over this? Can you look at this? Does this seem right to you? And Einstein says, if this is the case, give your info to the Nazis so neither side destroys the world. Yep. And we just talked about, we haven't gotten to that episode yet. We're recording these out of order. Just like Oppenheimer. So we just talked about World War I and kind of that camaraderie from one side to the other. Not a lot of that in World War II. No. But I thought this was an interesting little piece of it of, hey, make sure the other side doesn't kill everyone as well. Yeah. We're very much in a race against one another, and we're very much against one another, on opposite sides of this war, but let's not end the world.
Well, and the amazing part about this movie is that when they reveal that the Germans have learned how to split the atom way earlier in the movie, there is like a little soliloquy moment with Oppenheimer and another physicist where he's like, all the students think it's just this cool thing they've done. And he goes, me and every other physics professor in the world now know that you can make a super bomb.
Right.
Like we understand that theoretical physicists understand the implications of that finding. And so the race is on immediately, like
Right.
as soon as that information is released.
So Oppenheimer's family, Kitty and their children, moved to Los Alamos.
Played by Emily Blunt.
Yes, they move into Los Alamos, and Kitty walks in, and she goes, "There's no kitchen." And I thought that just showed that it was designed by men.
Oh yeah,
who were like, "Oh, we never put a kitchen in."
Or it's things that they mention later where they're like, "Oh yeah, we had to build a hospital and like a church and like all these things."
But not a kitchen. Forgot about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so they mention 1916, where a cargo ship explodes in the harbor.
Oh yeah, the Halifax, right?
So they're talking about this. This is the largest, like, caused by man explosion at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yeah. So what it is it's during World War I. It's in Halifax Harbor in Nova Scotia, Canada. Basically, what happens is a French cargo ship carrying high explosive material used experimental high explosive material that was beginning to be used in artillery shells collides with a Norwegian ship and blows up. And the resulting explosion is so incredibly catastrophic that it destroys an entire district of the city. It kills over 1,700 people, injures 9,000 more, and releases the energy equivalent of 2.9 kilotons of TNT.
Yikes.
It is apocalypse now, is what it feels like to the people of Halifax, because it's just this single ship. It's just one ship filled with explosives that just happens to catch on fire in a freak collision accident and blows up the entire harbor.
Now, this is more in line with the hydrogen bomb than the atom bomb, correct?
I think so. It's not really... The significance of the Halifax explosion is not what causes it, necessarily. Okay. It is the significance of chain reaction effect in explosions. So the thing about the Halifax is that it's not just one box of this chemical that blows up, it's the entire freaking ship, and it builds off of one another. That's how an A-bomb works. So it's not so much a direct link into the materials that happen, it's more of this is how destructive chain reaction explosions are when they happen by a freak accident, and if we harness one and do it on purpose, it's going to be insane.
Okay.
Is the link there. Like,
okay, so moving forward, they are attempting to build the bomb. Obviously it takes time. Oppenheimer goes to Chicago. And this is where they have the first self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction.
Mm-hmm. That they have in like a 30-foot thick concrete bunker.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
You'd definitely want some protection there. This is where we start to learn about his security clearance. He keeps having difficulty getting his security clearance.
Which is so funny because at this point he's been head of the project for like a year and a half.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, but at the same time, it's them trying to put it's the military trying to put a leash on him because of his associations with the Communist Party and because of his close associations with multiple people who would not be given security clearance.
And you realize more and more that despite his personality, the only person who likes Oppenheimer and like respects his role in the project in the military is Colonel Groves. Right. Everybody else seems to think he's just this radical who's expendable, and Groves is the only one who's like, no, I asked all the other people. This dude is him. Right. This is all I got.
So later on, Colonel Pash is going to meet with Oppenheimer, and he is like the hound dog for searching out anybody who is a double agent, anyone who is giving information they should not, and he is on Oppenheimer and wanting him to give names, and Oppenheimer's very uncomfortable here. He doesn't want to betray the trust, but he also is not willing to offer up his friends because he doesn't see them as a threat himself.
But he's also started to notice suspicious like activity among some of the people. Like, he's not an idiot. He knows that he has asked active communists to be part of this project, and there's this ongoing ideological discussion, which will probably be more relevant in the part 2 of this because it directly relates to what he's accused of in the 50s. But there's this ideological problem with the scientists where being scientists and not generals and not politicians, they have like an almost unforgivably ignorant view of the political dissonance between the Soviet Union and the other allies.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're like, we should just share all of these findings with the Soviets. And the US military is like, yeah, that's great, except as soon as World War II is over, we're probably going to be involved in some sort of conflict with the Soviet Union because we don't like them. We just don't hate them like we hate the Nazis. So we're not going to do that.
Which is what happened.
Yeah.
Okay, so Groves transfers Pash to London to get him off Oppenheimer's back, essentially. So like you were saying, Groves is trying to help Oppenheimer here. Niels, I forget. I don't know how to say it. Okay, anyways.
Niels Bohr. Yeah.
Niels Bohr, yeah. So Niels Bohr returns and explains that the British and Soviets, where they went wrong. And Oppenheimer realizes that his project is now ahead. It's leading. Yeah. And around this time, then he gets a call from San Francisco where he finds out that Jean Tatlock killed herself. Now, how she killed herself is a little ambiguous in the film. And another thing that was covered in that documentary, because the way it looks in the film, it looks like she puts pillows on the ground outside her bathtub and she holds her head underwater and drowns herself.
Except it kind of looks like somebody else does it.
And
in the film.
That is the conspiracy, is that the way that she was found is a very strange way to commit suicide. And it really seems like someone held her head underwater and drowned her. I guess it's never been proven one way or the other, but that's an interesting piece of history right there.
It's weird, it's kind of like Epstein hanging himself in a prison cell with nothing to do it with. He had no reason to do so. Yeah. Sometimes deaths are just suspicious.
A little suspicious there.
And she was actively being wiretapped and followed by the FBI. So just throwing that out there.
The closer we get to the Trinity test, the more Oppenheimer is going to realize the weight of what he is accomplishing here and what this means for the future.
And interestingly, the more he becomes fed up with the ideological optimism of his fellow scientists, like as the man in charge, he doesn't have the luxury of like lying to himself and saying this is all in theory, and if the war ends tomorrow, we just won't have to finish it. Like, he knows better, and so he starts to get not short, but less and less compromising of the well-intentioned but naive beliefs of the rest of the scientists in the movie, to the point where before the Trinity test even happens, Germany surrenders, and that's historical fact. Germany gets not RKO'd out of the war. Hitler commits suicide. All of these scientists, many of whom are Jewish, many of whom are communist or communist sympathizers, and all of whom view the Nazi Party as a disgrace to the earth, which valid, think that the bomb is being made to combat Germany. Yes. And since Germany has now fallen, we don't have to make a bomb. And Oppenheimer very succinctly reminds them that World War II is global. You're also fighting this military superpower called the Empire of Japan, and unlike Germany, they will not surrender.
Right.
And so, and at one point before they even do the test, one of the scientists says, well, Japan is at the brink of surrender, is what everybody says. And Oppenheimer says, tell that to the soldiers training to invade Japan,
Right.
So.
Which, fun fact, was my great-grandfather. I was hoping I could get some more details on exactly where he was, but he was stationed somewhere near or in Japan when the bomb was dropped.
He was probably in like the Philippines or Okinawa or somewhere. Off the top of my head, be my guess.
Yeah, I was hoping I could find out exactly where, but unfortunately, it may have been something that was kind of not passed down. Anyways, so there's still motivation to continue the project. I mean, besides, just being the first to do it.
They've also, at some point, you've spent billions of dollars on this in a time period where the average annual income of an American is like $3,000 or $4,000. So you gotta build a bomb. Like, even if you're not gonna drop it on anybody, at this point, the government will not let you not build a bomb.
Right. So at this point, they have 2 viable bombs. They plan to test in July. They named the test Trinity. There's a meeting with Secretary Stimson, and they talked about military targets, and they say there are none big enough. The test needs to happen before a peace conference between Truman and the Soviet leaders, if there is going to be a sharing of information here. Okay, man, it's go time. The bomb is assembled by what must have been the most puckered buttholes in history.
Oh, yeah.
Could you imagine being one of them, slowly putting the pieces together for the first atomic bomb test?
I don't even want to know, man. And the fact that there are scientists watching these soldiers, and like, no shade. I have lots of veterans in my life. They do amazing things for all of us. They're not always the most delicate human beings in the world. And so you have these soldiers just throwing these crates off of this truck. The scientists are like, that's a fucking bomb. Please don't. You're going to kill everybody. Like, could you just be gentle with that box? Like, please,
for the love of God.
Please, God. And then don't touch it. Like, just let us put it together.
And then on top of that, they're doing this, and there's this huge storm with lightning strikes going around. Oppenheimer knows the New Mexican desert, so he goes, it'll break right before dawn. There's a scene, and Oppenheimer addresses the near zero chance that when they hit the button, they will end the world. And Matt Damon Groves goes, near zero. And he goes, yeah, what do you expect?
Theory
from
won't
theory
take
alone?
You so far.
And he goes, zero. Zero would be better.
Zero would be better, yeah.
This scene itself is actually what first sparked the idea for Christopher Nolan to do this film. Was you realize you press a button and you may end the world, and yet they press it anyways. So yeah, the implosion test fails. They don't know why, but it's time to drop the bomb. Okay, 3 years, 4,000 people, $2 billion, culminating on an early morning test. They hand out sheets of welder's glass to dampen the brightness of the blast, and the countdown begins. 20 minutes, 2 minutes, 90 seconds, 60, 30. Oppenheimer says these things are hard on your heart. The countdown continues. 14, 13, 12, 11. It's silent. There's heavy breathing, and then you see brightness greater than the sun. Silence for a minute and 41 seconds in the film between the detonation and when the shockwave first reaches Oppenheimer. And he says, and now I am become death, destroyer of worlds. I mean, bro.
Yep.
So good. So good. Watching this in theaters, we watched it in IMAX. I would almost say, I'd say that watching it in IMAX was incredible, but it was almost too loud. That point, whenever it goes completely silent, was like an out-of-body experience.
Dude, it's crazy. I can't even, like, even watching it at home, like when I rewatched it to film this, I still was like, oh God.
Glued.
It's coming.
Yeah, my eyes were glued to the screen. In the theater, people covered their ears.
Yeah.
Expecting the shockwave. And it did not disappoint. It was loud. Like the rest of it was. It was very loud.
Funny Kyle moment to take up valuable time that we don't have for this podcast. When I went to go see Oppenheimer, Dustin was playing hard to get, so I went with a different friend to go see it. He was like having a baby soon or some stupid crap. I don't know. I don't know. Preparing for the inevitable awfulness that is parenthood. So I went with my friend Gracie because she had wanted to see it and she had asked me first, and I was like, yeah, okay. And Kyle does not like loud noises. Like, I just don't. I've never liked loud noises, more so than most people don't. And so there's a mini bomb test that comes out of nowhere, like 10, 15 minutes before the scene.
Oh, yeah.
scared the crap out of me.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I like jumped out of my chair, and so I know this explosion is coming, right? I know it's going to be so loud, and I have a minute and 40 seconds to get irrationally afraid, and I am
A minute and 41 seconds.
I am here with my friend, who's a substantially smaller human than I am, and it took every like piece of my body to not hold her hand for my personal comfort. Not because I was going to protect her from the big scary noise, but because I was like, please God, somebody save me from the scary noise that is coming. I didn't. I held my nerve, and then weirdly, when you see it in theaters, the main explosion is not as bad because you've already like been jump scared by the out of nowhere little explosion, and so you're like, okay, like I'm ready for this.
In IMAX, even when he's like seeing the sparks and it's just the music and everything, even that was like frustratingly loud. Like it was okay, this is taking me out of it. And I feel like they could have, I don't know if that was just the theater that I was in or what.
I think it was just the IMAX, because when I watched it in the normal theater at the Alamo, it was loud, and it was abrasively loud, but it wasn't uncomfortably loud. Like, it didn't throw you out of the moment, like, loud. So.
Okay, so quick couple questions here. Did they get sunburned?
I don't think they did, but they were worried they would. Because you got to remember that this has never been done before, ever. And so they just have to prepare for the worst possible case scenario. And they have ideas of what's going to happen. But to my knowledge, nobody got sunburned, but people were way closer than they would be for subsequent tests because radiation damage and radiation fallout distance was not fully understood. And there were Native Americans and ranchers living well within the safety radius that would later be established, including Oppenheimer and other scientists, at the observation points. What we do know is that the explosion, have some fun facts here for you.
Here we go.
The explosion created a crater approximately 4.7 feet deep and 88 yards. So let me do some mental math. About, 260 yards wide, or 260 feet wide. The radius of the layer of this thing called trinitite, which is what was created by the Trinity test. It's radioactive silica sand that turns green and glassy.
Very neat.
Was 330 yards. So 3 football fields and some change around this massive crater. The desert is now green cancer glass.
Is it still green? Do you know?
Probably. I mean, I would assume so. I don't know if it's like dangerously radioactive. It was only mildly radioactive when it was created. So I'm assuming danger-wise it's probably low, but it would still be glass. Like, it's not going to not be glass. It's just, I'm assuming dispersed.
I'm going to go to New Mexico, do me some cancer sand.
Apparently, at the time of detonation, the surrounding mountains were illuminated brighter than daytime for about 2 seconds. The heat at the base camp was hot as an oven. The observed colors changed from purple to green to white. The roar of the shockwave in real life took 40 seconds to hit.
Wow.
It was felt over 100 miles away, and the mushroom cloud reached 7.5 miles high.
Insane.
So if you were in a modern-day Boeing 727 plane flying over Los Alamos, the mushroom cloud would have hit your plane and then gone 5,000 feet above it.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. To put that into perspective that like people can grasp, like it would have been a mile taller than your 30,000 cruising altitude plane.
Okay, so dumb question. It's at the top of a tower.
Yeah.
Does it drop or does it explode from the top?
It, from my understanding, dropped and then exploded a certain distance above. So I think, in reality, I think it's just blown up from the top of the tower. Don't quote me on that. But the thing about nuclear bombs is that, especially like bombs, not missiles, but like the original A-bombs, is that they have to explode a certain altitude above the surface.
Right.
Otherwise, they'll just blow a hole in the earth. And so it'll be like super catastrophic, but it won't have the militarized effect of it.
Right.
So you have to like detonate them a certain distance above the ground.
Very interesting.
I think it was just blown up from the tower itself, if I understand. weirdly, that's still something that like isn't classified, but it's kind of hard to find like the actual answer. So when they actually dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, they set the detonation height at about 1,800, 1,900 feet in the air.
Right.
Because there's this thing called the Mach stem blast reinforcing effect. And so it explodes so violently that it like shoots a giant pressure wave of fire downwards as well. So the mushroom cloud doesn't grow from the ground up. It sprouts from the bomb.
Right.
It goes up and down at the same time. And so the thing that kills people is not just the heat wave, but it's the downward crazy ass pressure from this explosion that just smacks down on the ground.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So after the Trinity test, Groves tells Oppenheimer, "We'll take it from here." And now his creation's in the hands of the U.S. military. That meeting between Stalin and Truman,
The Potsdam Conference.
Yeah, that little thing. Truman says we have a powerful new weapon, and Stalin says he hopes they'll use it against Japan, and that's the extent of what other countries were warned. And even I do believe they told Japan we have a powerful weapon. We will use it if you don't surrender.
And Japan was like, "We call bullshit." And we went, "Okay."
All right.
All right.
So Oppenheimer learns at the same time as everyone else over the radio Truman's announcement. August 6th, 1945, 8:15 a.m. The bomb is dropped on Hiroshima. Groves congratulates Oppie. And he really not regrets, but he has conflicting emotions about what he's done and what he's created as he visualizes the charred remains of Japanese civilians. He no longer hears the applause. He fears the continued use of the bomb and the escalation of the war rather than its demise. And then he gets the cover of Time magazine. So the radio announcement from Truman was actually recorded on camera as well. And there is a kind of in between takes. There is this huge smile that flashes across his face, like he's just reading another news bulletin.
Yeah.
Not to really state any opinions here or anything, but the Truman that's portrayed in the film and his lack of understanding of how much destruction has been unleashed to the world, not just on Japan, but just now we know what we can do. It's just interesting that Oppenheimer is torn apart by this, and Truman, one, wants to take credit for dropping the bomb, and two, seems to have no second thoughts about it.
Yeah, there's a very much racial element of the war in the Pacific that doesn't manifest in Europe. A lot of the outrage about the Nazis, though we detest them during the war, happened in the very, very ending months of the war when we discover concentration camps and we realize just how incredibly abhorrent the Nazi regime was. Japan, they attacked Pearl Harbor without warning. They marched American servicemen and Filipino servicemen on death marches because they didn't expect that many Americans to surrender because Japanese soldiers didn't surrender. They engaged in kamikaze warfare. They raped and pillaged and murdered hundreds of thousands of people in China even before World War II officially started. They are known for their own racial views of the rest of Asian society, and how they are superior. There, in my professional opinion, there is a hatred of Japan and the Japanese war effort that doesn't, in the hearts of Americans, at least like the home population, that doesn't exist to the same extent against Germany. So I hazard to say if we'd have dropped the atomic bomb on Germany, it would not have been viewed quite as like grossly positive as it was then. It would have probably been more like, well, it would have been like the Dresden firebombing and the firestorm that happens afterwards that kills like, God, a quarter of the population of the city of Dresden. It's awful. It's necessary, but it's awful. The atomic bomb was kind of like, yeah, take that, you pieces of shit. Like, it was, like, it just honestly was. Like, that was kind of the mentality. was, you fanatic crazy bastards, have an atomic bomb and have another one because we hate the crap out of you.
Yeah.
Like, and it was it was also, it saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of American soldiers, and despite how destructive they were, inarguably still saved the lives of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Japanese soldiers and civilians. However, like you said, there does seem to be a certain joy about wreaking unknown destruction upon these two Japanese cities.
Yeah.
That is very, 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 like, not okay. like is not something that should ever be that view. Like, you shouldn't be happy to drop atomic warfare on people.
Right. Doesn't matter who it is.
Yeah. Like, that should not be something that you're like, yeah, love to see that.
Right. I think that's something that we discuss more now than was discussed at the time, because World War II was just so horrible that people just wanted it to end. They didn't really care how. Just end it. Just so we can move on, so we can be done.
Yeah.
And well, this brings about the end of World War II.
And I don't mean to portray it like we only dropped the atomic bomb on Japan because we were racist or because we hated them more. If Germany had still been in the war, we'd have dropped the atomic bomb on Germany. Like, it is a military decision. It's just, I think that the lack of any remorse in the moment from most people is a uniquely Pacific War thing, especially because you kill so many civilians and you know you're going to, and you know the argument is you have to, so you do it. But people know that, like, these aren't military targets, like, as we see in the movie. So the relief is one thing, excitement is quite another. And I think, like, when you see reactions to it from people, like you said, there's an excitement there that unnerves you a little bit. Because it's not just, oh, thank God the war is over. It's like, oh, yeah, take that. Like,
all right, well, we're going to stop this episode here, and we're going to talk about how an angry old Iron Man is going to get his comeuppance.
Yes, he is.
Thank you all again for tuning in to season 2. We're super excited about this. Very appreciative of everybody. Been having such a blast with it. Kyle, any words of wisdom for these people in this week while they wait for the second episode?
Yeah. Don't touch green glass sand that you find in the middle of New Mexico. just don't do it.
Just don't do it.
Bad idea. Don't be happy about nuclear warfare.
Oh, there you go. There's a good one too. All right.
Don't be happy about that. It's bad. It's a bad thing. Don't enjoy that.
All right. Well, y'all take care. We will see you next time.
Peace.